Life's Biggest Questions, SCP-3008. Have you ever been lost in an Ikea? Apparently it's a pretty common occurrence. Those big labyrinthian warehouses make it real easy for you to take a wrong turn and lose your bearings entirely. The absolute magnitude of these modular furniture stores also make it easy for people to camp out overnight, as proven by the countless YouTubers who decided to stick around after dark a few years ago. It may seem like fun, but if you change a couple factors, your trip to Ikea can quickly accelerate into terrifying territory. This is especially true when the Ikea is endlessly big and full of violent, faceless monsters. Yeah, you came into the store to buy a bedside table and a lamp, and now you're fighting for your life using the lamp as a weapon. Oh boy. SCP-3008 appears to be a big, abandoned Ikea building. Nothing too weird about it from the outside, just a blue and yellow warehouse in an empty car park. However, once you enter through those front doors, everything changes. Anyone who strolls through the sliding doors and walks far enough to be out of sight will be translocated into SCP-3008-1. Usually the victims won't notice until they try to leave and are unable to find the exit. With no visible walls and nothing implying that the open space inside will end, this Ikea might be infinite. It has all the regular features though: long winding aisles, different departments populated with furniture for specific rooms, a cafeteria every once in a while. You better like Swedish meatballs, because that's all you're getting for the foreseeable future. Apparently a whole bunch of people have wandered into this furniture store and never found their way out. Many have been present since before the Foundation contained the Ikea. Groups of folks have formed rudimentary civilizations and created little settlements to live in. There are multiple settlements all spread out across many kilometers within the ever-expanding Swedish megamart. These towns help the folks living inside feel like people again, but they also perform a more urgent function. They defend against attacking entities. Designated as instances of 3008-2 or staff, these entities are humanoid in shape, but often have exaggerated and inconsistent bodily proportions. Anyone who has seen one will describe it as either too short or too tall. In addition to their weird bodies, these creepy creatures lack a face or organs. Plus, they're always wearing the Ikea uniform: yellow shirt, blue pants. Yeesh, not exactly the customer service we're looking for, huh? Oh, no thanks, I'm just browsing now, thanks. No, please leave me alone. 3008-1 has a day-night cycle consistent with the opening and closing times of a regular Ikea. The lights will flicker on in the morning and abruptly shut off once it's night. During nighttime, the freakish 3008-2s will become extremely violent and attempt to kill any human nearby. As they rip and tear, they can also be heard uttering phrases like, "The store is now closed. Please exit the building." Don't you think I would if I could? Once fluorescent daylight returns, they revert back to a passive state and will not bother anyone unless provoked. There are exits and people have escaped, but the locations of these seem to be inconsistent, always moving around, which makes it very difficult for individuals to make a concerted effort to leave. The most notable escapee made it out while the Foundation maintained containment. He was being chased by an instance of 3008-2 and killed immediately upon exit. Foundation agents discovered an Ikea branded notebook on him with an account of his experience in the anomalous store. His account details wandering alone for a while before coming across a human settlement known as Exchange. Yes, the town was named after the department it was nearest. He lived there for about 6 months, achieving some sort of normalcy. It was kind of like when the people settled down in The Walking Dead, you know, scavenging for supplies and warding off a steady influx of walkers. Crude weapons were fashioned and lots of meatballs consumed for sure. Although he noticed there wasn't any weather in this space, and all the people living in the settlement had very different accounts of the reality that they originated in. Some folks had no knowledge of things like the Statue of Liberty or the International Space Station, even though they seem to come from English-speaking North America. This opens the possibility of 3008 being multi-dimensional, with people being fed in from different universes. Right before the journal writer escaped, Exchange was demolished by a massive group of the staff. Apparently they're attracted to their own corpses and will attack whatever is nearby. Someone had left a chunk of staff in the supply boxes, which lured an insane amount of these things to the settlement. There were so many staff corpses being piled up against the barricades that they could literally just climb over the bodies of the previous ones into the safe zone. That is like some World War Z type stuff. So now that we've got a pretty vivid picture of what's going on inside SCP-3008, we need to start thinking about what would happen if it were real. How would we deal with an anomaly like this if it really existed? Oh boy. The easy answer would be to destroy it outright, but who knows what would happen to the people within. Plus, how do we figure out exactly where this thing is? And it seems to pull people from all sorts of different dimensions, so there's no guarantee that taking out one facade would really make any sort of difference at all. So what would probably end up happening was a whole lot of college students and city dwellers ending up trapped in the catacombs of meta Ikea. Some people would even enjoy it. The modern world involves so much existential dread, it would be nice to have a singular purpose for a while, just survive. No currency, no taxes, no rent, no career aspirations, just fortifying defenses and scavenging for Ikea frozen yogurt. The journal left behind by the escapee is a pretty solid description of what might happen if something like this were real. People would band together for safety and rebuild some semblance of a society. It's just what people do. His account was quite sunshiny though, with people from different settlements being totally generous and non-aggressive. This is less likely to happen in real life, well, because people are dicks. Yes, different groups would band together and form alliances based on mutual agreements, but there's always something in short supply and people don't often want to do without the essentials. So inevitably faction-based combat would break out, adding to the dangers of the already terrifying staff, like a true Walking Dead scenario. Maybe due to the anomalous properties of the Ikea, there'd be enough food and drink and shelter for everyone. But even then, interpersonal conflicts about the best courses of action, Ikea politics, and relationships would arise. It's human nature to fight with each other. Eventually, a hierarchy would be established and different groups would be afforded different amounts of power. Once the dust settled, I think there would be potential for society to actually take leaps and bounds forward. There's enough technology in an Ikea to allow for some big scientific brains to recreate a lot of the amenities that exist in the outside world. Although plentiful, I don't think the staff are very smart and could likely be kept at a distance with electric fences, turrets, or other security measures. Whatever they can dream up. The space inside is boundless too, so I am sure advanced methods of transportation would be developed as well. Soon enough, a parallel modern society would exist within 3008, with all sorts of Ikea brand items repurposed to be everything people ever needed. Who knows? Maybe once the society spreads far enough, the exits will become more apparent. But at that point, would the folks even really want to rejoin society as we know it? They've recreated their lives here and probably don't feel like readjusting to the cruel, capitalistic hell world on the outside. Long live the Ikea people.
SCP-2317. It may very well be the most dangerous SCP out there. If not, it's definitely one of them. And it's such a dangerous monster, or creature, or being, we don't even know what it actually is. It's referred to as an entity that could destroy the entire world. Some refer to it as the Scarlet King, while others claim they're two separate entities. It seems SCP-2317's identity is up to interpretation. Some believe it is in fact the Scarlet King, which is based on SCP-231-7, one of 7 variations of SCP-231. This is because SCP-231-1 through 7 were rescued from a cult called the Children of the Scarlet King. All of the SCP-231-1 through 6 have died one way or another, with the only remaining SCP-231 being 7. That being said, it seems like that SCP-231-7 is quite literally the only thing holding SCP-2317 in place. So if SCP-2317 isn't the Scarlet King, what exactly is it? Well, this one seems to be extremely intricate and complicated. Technically speaking, SCP-2317 is a wooden door. Now, a wooden door probably wouldn't make you question whether the end of the world is near, but what's located beyond the door surely will. It's believed SCP-2317 is a portal to another dimension. The dimension is an everlasting open area of land, more specifically a salt pan, which is just a large area made up mostly of salt and other minerals. There are no bodies of water nearby, and the land has been dried up for thousands of years. This land is also home to the monster that is a part of the umbrella that is considered SCP-2317. As previously mentioned, technically speaking, SCP-2317 is a wooden door, but SCP-2317 is really everything that happens behind that wooden door, which includes this evil entity also referred to as the unnamed devourer of worlds. This creature is allegedly 600,000 feet tall and was bound by 7 chains or hooks, which are correlated to SCP-231-1 through 7. However, as previously mentioned, all SCP-231-1 through 6s have been terminated one way or another. This means that only one chain or hook, SCP-231-7, is the only thing keeping this evil entity bound. SCP-231 has levels of security for specific procedures, which request specific orders to be carried out depending on your level of security clearance. However, upon further research, it has been determined that these ritualistic procedures are completely useless and were implemented to prevent SCP employees from panicking. It seems there is no real way to contain SCP-2317 beyond what's already been done. These magical chains, or whatever it is that's holding this entity in place, are irreplaceable. Unfortunately, of the 7, 6 of them have been broken, meaning there was only 1 left stopping this entity from destroying our world. Although attempts have been made to not only repair the chains as they were breaking, but to recreate new chains as well, nothing seems to be efficient enough. It seems to only be a matter of time, whether it's months, years, or decades, until SCP-2317 is able to break free. This would lead to the sure destruction of Earth and the human race. So now that we know about SCP-2317, what happens if it's real? Well, I think it's quite obvious. I mean, it's been given the name Devourer of Worlds for a reason. This thing breaks free from what's keeping it bound, and we're done for. That being said, it seems SCP-2317 is so secretive that majority of the professionals in charge of it don't even know its true power or identity. From the most basic SCP employee up until the level of security clearance before the top, everyone is under the impression a daily ritual must be done to stop SCP-2317 from breaking free. Only the Overseer Council know the truth behind SCP-2317, that it can't be stopped by anything. However, rather than sending the entire Foundation into a frenzy fearing for their lives, the Overseer Council has put a plan into effect to try to find ways to contain SCP-2317 while giving their employees a false belief that they are doing everything in their powers to do so already. So although the end of the world would be inevitable at the hands of SCP-2317, that wouldn't happen until it was able to break free from its final chain, which is SCP-231-7. And up until the end of the world, we wouldn't even know of its existence, or how dangerous of a creature or entity it really is. In fact, even those tasked with containing SCP-2317 wouldn't know the truth of its containment until it was far too late. And as awful or as scary as that may seem, if we didn't know the end of the world was happening until it just happened, we wouldn't really have much time to fully understand what's going on. And I think we'd be better off that way. Rather than worrying about when SCP-2317 will break free and destroy the Earth and human civilization as we know it, we'll just go about our day in normal lives until one day we just simply cease to exist. It seems that really is the only option because the SCP really has no way of containing SCP-2317, even if they don't know it yet. What if SCP-53 was real? Contained in a 16-foot by 16-foot cell of sorts, or chamber, filled with toys, games, and other childlike entertainment devices, SCP-53 appears to be a 3-year-old girl. Given 3 meals a day with the option of 2 snacks in between each meal as she requests, SCP-53 seems to be harmless. Proven to have a mental development slightly above average and the ability to speak, SCP-53 could easily pass as anyone's daughter. However, it seems she's capable of inhumane powers. Although SCP-53 is a nice and friendly girl for the most part, she tends to get upset when she's in the presence of groups of people. Because of this, the SCP Foundation only allows 1 member in her enclosed area at a time and limits the personnel to no more than 10 minutes in the chamber. Anyone who makes eye contact, stays within a certain distance for more than 10 minutes, or comes within physical contact with SCP-53 will start acting irrational. Most of the time, the subject who becomes affected will also become paranoid and homicidal, usually toward SCP-53. However, before the infected subject will try to attack SCP-53, they'll either kill or scare off any visible humans. When the subject then goes after SCP-53, they will suffer a massive heart attack or multiple seizures and die within seconds of doing any physical harm to SCP-53. Any and all damage done to this SCP will heal almost instantly, regardless of how severe the injury is. SCP-53, however, appears to be ignorant when it comes to her powers, if you call them that, and when questioned about her abilities, she is incapable of having a response. So we have an SCP here that more or less only affects those who come near her. She's not going to go out into the world and randomly start attacking people. She's happy in her little chamber, being fed and given toys and games to play with like any other kid. So now the million-dollar question: what if she was real? Well, I don't think all that much would change. As we know, the SCP Foundation is classified. All their information is top secret, so it's not like the general public would necessarily be told about this 3-year-old girl who kills anyone that comes into contact with her and can heal her own wounds instantly. With that being said, it's quite clear that SCP-53 isn't human. Although she has the appearance of a human, it seems SCP-53 is an extraterrestrial being of sorts that has shape-shifting abilities to make her look as if she's a human. So what does that mean? Well, if it isn't clear enough, the existence of SCP-53 would confirm in fact that aliens do exist, and she'd just be our first subject. Unfortunately, when it comes to testing and understanding her species, well, that'd be the real issue. Any scientists or researchers who tried to study her for more than 10 minutes would end up losing their life. Anyone who tried to touch her or dissect her would also die. And even if the SCP Foundation wanted to kill her and then perform an autopsy to see what's happening inside, well, that too seems to be impossible. The fact that this girl can heal any and all wounds makes it incredibly difficult to kill her. Of course, with this knowledge, we'd want to find out if there are any others of her kind. Where did she come from? Space? Or is this a man-made experiment? There are tons of questions that would need to be answered regarding this one. Does her age ever change? Does she get any bigger or stay the same size her entire life? And what is her expected lifespan? Is she immortal? So many questions that would need to be answered, and unfortunately, only time will give us the answers we need. But in that time, while she's still being held captive, who knows how many members of the SCP Foundation will end up losing their lives. With that being said, I feel anyone who's willing to sign up and work for the SCP Foundation knows the possible risks of what could possibly happen to them. So, I guess it's kinda on them. Anyways, to wrap this one up, if SCP-53 were real, well, it may be the evidence that we've been searching for regarding life in space. Or, at the very least, a distant relative to the human race. One thing is for sure, this girl isn't human, and therefore should not be treated like one. What if SCP-811 was real? Standing at about 5'6" and just under 100 pounds, SCP-811, also known as AA, resembles that of a disproportionate woman. With long, thin limbs and a bloated stomach, AA looks like someone that would be given the nickname Swamp Woman. With rugged-looking green skin and oily black hair, AA looks as if she could be partially human and partially monster. Her skin produces a clear green-tinted mucus with minor adhesive properties as per the SCP. Although the mucus doesn't appear to affect AA, it appears anything else that comes into contact with it rapidly decomposes until it's turned into a thick black liquid. This liquid is absorbed into AA, and it appears this liquid makes up majority of her insides. Without the ability to defecate due to a lack of intestines, AA collects everything it can't metabolize in an area, we'll say is its stomach for lack of a better word. Everything that is collected in the stomach and isn't metabolized is then turned into a grainy tar-like substance that AA produces and periodically voluntarily vomits up. More specifically, AA would use this technique to hunt or fend off predators, usually aiming to cover the victim's eyes and mouth to suffocate them. Alternatively, if this sludge were to get into an open wound, it could also lead to a fatal bacterial infection, which would kill you after a few days. This infection can be treated with antibiotics as long as the victim is attended to within the first 3 hours of being infected. Another interesting feature about the SCP is that it understands and can speak broken English. This is evident in the conversation AA had with Dr. Trebuchet and his junior lab assistant, Wachtel. AA explains how before she was being held by the SCP Foundation, she was taken by a man much bigger than her. She goes on to explain how she was stabbed in the elbow with a needle, started throwing up red stuff, which is presumably blood, and then she ate this man. Following her explaining these events, Wachtel got sick, AA got scared, and the conversation officially ended when she returned into her enclosure. Based on this conversation and the fact that AA can speak broken English, it's clear that SCP-811 was once human, and whatever was injected into her transformed her into this woman-like swamp creature of sorts. It's not clear why she was abducted or what it was that she was injected with, but one thing is for sure, it was against her own will. She's not an aggressive creature by any means and seems to get scared the way a child would when someone reacts in a way she doesn't understand. So what does it mean if she's real? Well, it'd be incredibly scary. Not so much the fact that she exists, but more so what happened to her. She's an experiment gone wrong. Sort of. Although it's unclear who the man was that abducted her or what it was that was injected into her, one thing is for sure, she's a mutant. Now, I'm not talking about a mutant like X-Men, and there's all different kinds of these naturally born superhumans popping up all over the world. But whatever it was this poor girl was injected with completely changed her biology, to the point that she threw up blood and possibly some organs, and then ate a fully grown man, although it may have simply been out of fear. It also turned her into this green swamp woman creature. She also has lungs and teeth, but their purpose seems to be obsolete. Again, this further proves that SCP-811 was once a regular girl that was injected with something that mutated her into what she currently is. And that in itself is really where the problem here lies. So what if this SCP was real? Well, it wouldn't necessarily be her we'd have to worry about. She'd be in one of two places. Either in this tank that the SCP Foundation has made for her, where she's being held and taken care of, or in a random swamp only really attacking people who she feels is a potential threat. Of course, there is the possibility that someone stumbles upon her, contacts authorities, and they try to capture or kill her. The most likely scenario, assuming the SCP Foundation hasn't found her, would be that AA lives in a swampy area feeding on whatever it is she decides to eat. If any humans were to approach the swamp, she'd most likely get scared and just hide, unbeknownst to her visitors. The problem with SCP-811 being real wouldn't be the SCP itself, but whatever it was that turned her from human to swamp woman. Was it possibly a mad scientist, or was it a government official? Figuring out who abducted this SCP as a child and what she was injected with would be the real problem here. Is the government testing mutant gene crossing with regular children or unsuspecting citizens? That's a scary thought in itself. More so the fact that there is a substance that, when injected, completely changes your biology without killing you. That is what is so terrifying about this SCP. Not what she is, but what happened to her. Now, if you've been a fan of the channel, you'll know I normally end our videos by saying this isn't a concern of ours because the SCP isn't real or this fictional character exists just in that world. However, this time around, I can't say for sure whether or not the government is doing some shady stuff behind the scenes. Not to say they're abducting children and injecting them with needles, turning them into mutants, but I don't know for sure. What would happen if SCP-701 was real? So as I mentioned, SCP-701 is a play. It's titled The Hanged King's Tragedy. It's a 5-act play that is set sometime in the 1600s or the Caroline era. Upon being performed, both the cast and crew as well as audience members will start to behave in erratic ways, both violent and suicidal. Regardless of the relationship, audience members will start attacking each other for reasons unknown. Another important detail is throughout the performance, a shadow-like mysterious figure will appear on stage periodically, which is classified as SCP-701-1. At the end of the play, after all cast members are deceased on stage, SCP-701-1 will then appear in the middle of the stage between the corpses, watching as the audience members fight each other. However, outbreaks don't necessarily always occur following a performance. Statistically, according to the SCP Foundation, outbreaks occur 36.78% of the time, based on an unknown amount of performances. Unfortunately, a lot of information regarding SCP-701 has been blacked out or expunged. However, based on previous reports, we know how the outbreak usually begins. 7 to 14 days leading up to opening night, during dress rehearsals, cast members will start to deviate from the script. But rather than it seem like the actors are improvising scenes or going off the cuff, these deviations will be very consistent with the story of the play, and it will seem as if they're reciting text from a newer version of the play's script. The entire production of the play will seem unaware of any changes from the original script, and if the change is brought to their attention by someone, they will state the play has always run that way. The outbreak usually does occur, if at all, on opening night or the night when the audience's attendance has reached its peak. An hour to 2 hours prior to the outbreak, SCP-701-1 will appear throughout the performance. It may appear to enter and exit stage, but it will never be seen backstage, and cast members do not comment or notice SCP-701-1 at first. The event will officially start during the banquet scene of Act 5 of the performance. During this act, every member of the cast will either murder each other or commit suicide while on stage. Members of the audience will then grow increasingly violent, attacking each other randomly. After the event, if any of the audience members survive, they will then leave the theater or space where the performance was and continue engaging in random acts of violence until they are restrained or sedated. Approximately after 24 hours of the event, those affected by the outbreak who have been restrained or sedated will begin to act normally again. Of those who make a recovery from the event, some may have no recollection of the event even taking place, while others will show signs consistent with victims of trauma. The most unfortunate of those who do survive will be permanently in a comatose state or considered psychotic. Of course, the SCP Foundation has given its agents strict orders to cover up and suppress any performances of the Hanged King's Tragedy, and for the most part, they've been successful. Majority of the 1971 publications of the play were destroyed before distribution. That being said, copies of the 1965 version have been found quite regularly in both colleges and high schools. Foundation agents are to obtain and destroy any copies they come across immediately. More specifically, it seems the play is most popular in the United Kingdom and the United States. Although a ton of information has been retracted, the first known outbreak on record occurred during the 1800s in the USA. Throughout the 1900s, other outbreaks have been recorded taking places all over the United States, from small theaters to university performances. A performance of the play was to be broadcasted on television nationwide, but the Foundation shut it down before the performance aired. Currently, there are 5 known copies of the play dating back to 1940, and with the most recent being from 1971. There are also copies that have been mistitled or with improper spelling that those who are a part of the Foundation also need to be aware of. So now that you have a rough understanding of this SCP, which is simply a piece of literature that somehow is able to control others, let's talk about what would happen if it were in fact real. If you've watched some of our previous SCP videos or you know about the Foundation, then you know they tend to conceal evidence from the public. More specifically, when events such as SCP-701 happen, the Foundation finds ways to cover up the truth. Whether that means denying the event ever happened or giving the series of events a more believable, for lack of a better word, backstory, it would be impossible for us to know the truth behind this play, or at the very least, what it's capable of doing to us. Those who are able to survive the event itself, as previously mentioned, will either have no recollection of it happening or be seen as a psychopath. To summarize, anyone who falls victim to the play's outbreak, which happens on average just over 1 out of every 3 performances, will never be the same again if they find a way to survive the initial attack. Unfortunately, there would be no way of studying what the cause of the cast and audience members' actions stems from, simply because we wouldn't know what's happening. Of course, the SCP Foundation would need to be the one ones to conduct this research, but it seems they are even stumped. So without any real way of stopping this play from outbreaking, it seems unfortunately, theater lovers and actors will fall victim to this play until the end of time. Of course, there's no guarantee that an outbreak would happen every time. That being said, the fact that a performance of a written literature can alter someone's mind is quite scary. Art is supposed to make people feel things. Whether it's happy, sad, angry, it's supposed to evoke emotion. And technically, all good art does evoke emotion. So in a sense, SCP-701 is real to a degree. Any films, TV shows, songs, plays, and so on that have ever made you feel any kind of way is the epitome of SCP-701. It may not necessarily make you do things you don't have much control over, but listening to a specific song at the gym because you feel it gives you the ability to lift more weight is the same as SCP-701 controlling people to act a certain way. Using the example of music at the gym, you may be conscious on the effect it has on you, but it's still affecting you nonetheless.
What if SCP-1498 was real? If you're unfamiliar with the machinations of SCP-1498, you might be wondering, what's with all the talk of dreams? It's not just pleasant conversation, it's the main function of the creature in question. The creatures, if I'm being particular. SCP-1498 is a collection of 30 autonomous bundles of phone cords and handsets, all assembled in such a way that they resemble sheep. Classic, considering the many associations between woolly livestock and sleep. Despite being made of outdated phone materials, these beings are fully ambulatory and able to wander around constantly and aimlessly. If someone were to walk up and use one of these handsets like a regular phone, they would hear 3 rings followed by a voice identifying themselves as an operator of the One-Eye Collective. Like any good phone operator, they will give the caller some instructions. They'll give them options for dreaming and make enhanced dreaming suggestions. Once the call is completed, options selected, the caller will lose consciousness for 9 hours. And honestly, that already sounds like a dream come true. 9 whole hours of sleep? What is this, paradise? During these 9 hours, the caller will indeed experience whatever dream they ordered. Every detail will be correct, every addition tended to. Whatever their perfect dream might be, if they ordered it, they got it. Upon waking up, they'll let you know that they experienced the requested dream and likely want to return to that as soon as possible. I mean, wouldn't you? If someone uses 1498 repeatedly, they'll begin to notice changes to their body and mind. A desire to sleep as frequently as possible will develop, especially if they have access to the SCP. Then, over time, portions of their head will be replaced with telephone parts similar to the ones making up these sheep creatures. They'll start coughing up telephones with cords extending into their esophagus. Hair will become telephone wires, ringers will replace their ears, and their voice will sound like a dial tone. All of this is distressing, but the subject will continue use in order to get those perfect dreams. Eventually, an entire rotary phone will assemble itself on their head, and these subjects will display the same intelligence as instances of 1498. These humanoid phone beings are known as 1498-1, and there has been no successful reversal of this process. They'll spend the rest of their days wandering about making phone sounds. But hopefully they're happy within the dream. Maybe it's an eternal one within. It's kind of like choosing to enter the Matrix, but without any of the weird fluid tubes or cool green binary. You could know Kung Fu. Why does this happen? Who are the One-Eye? Well, if that name sounds familiar, it's because the One-Eye are primordial deities in Greek mythology, the personifications of dreams taking the forms of black-winged demons. But the demons here aren't black-winged. In fact, we don't even see them at all. It seems that the sheep are primarily vessels through which the collective spreads their influence. In these stories of old, these deities would present different images to dreamers. Phantazos were the personifications of the elements. Phobator were the images of beasts, birds, and serpents, and lastly, Morpheus were those that appeared human. Morpheus, eh? I guess my Matrix analogy holds up. Homer's Odyssey classifies dreams coming through gates of ivory as false, and ones coming through gates of horn as true. And what do some older people call the telephone? The horn. Could it be that the One-Eye are showing us our true selves through dreams by accessing us via the horn? Or am I simply looking too deep here? How do you interpret this? Well, now that we've got the basics down and have briefly explored some of the surrounding information, let's think about what would happen if SCP-1498 was real. It's likely that the world would quickly discover the sheep's properties and divide into factions. There would be those who saw the sheep as horrifying, a perversion of the human mind and body. Those that became instances of 1498-1 were to be mourned as if they had died. People that chose to dream using these anomalous effects would be considered reckless, lazy, inept. these perfect dreams would seem nightmarish. Holding on to the real world with all their might, they would rally against those who would heed the call of the One-Eye-Roi. Hard work and freedom through suffering would be the guiding principles of these people. On the other hand, there would be those who saw the dream sheep as saviors. Folks who believe that the world is full of too much pain, too much injustice. These are the people who would turn to the One-Eye-Roi in order to achieve a sort of transcendence. Through use of the anomalous qualities, people would achieve their perfect dream state. The shambling telephone men who underwent total transformation would be seen as totems of perfection. They had achieved eternal splendor through slumber. I can only imagine that a sort of new religious movement would sprout up from this. As there are only 30 sheep total, they would become a commodity of sorts. The worshippers of dreams would then put systems in place to ensure that only the most deserving had access to the sheep. Charismatic leaders, high priests of dreaming, would find the spotlight and preach to the followers of One-Eye-Roi. Strive for greatness, follow the teachings, maybe someday you will be given access to the eternal dream sheep. Martyrs and holy folk would emerge too. People who had only partially transformed into phone creatures would be regarded as saints. Ones who resisted the full pull of paradise to spread the good word. A new world order would emerge, looking to the sheep for salvation. Of course, having two groups with beliefs at odds could only result in one thing: war. The dreamers would attempt to assimilate those who did not believe, resulting in aggression between the factions. Attempts would be made to destroy sheep or steal and exploit their capabilities for money and power. Even something so peaceful as sleeping and dreaming would result in bloodshed. And in the end, it would be up to the sides to decide the fate of the world. Would the dreamers successfully get people near and far to submit to the forever fantasy? Or would the pragmatics destroy the means of achieving phone ascension? Or maybe, just maybe, they would learn to live in harmony. It's a fascinating prospect, considering the permanency of many options. Maybe humanity would succumb completely to the warm embrace of the night, full of phone people. If there's no shame in being a phone person if we're all phone people, right? In a way, we're already on the way there, living fantasy lives through our phones, preferring what we see through these windows into another world to real life. How many of you are watching this video on a dark piece of glass right now? Meta, right?